Welcome to baseball seasons 1974, 7-15.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy!
Henry Aaron last year hit 40, drove in 96 runs, had a batting average of .301. Steps in for his first at-bat of the season with 2 on and 1 down.
If somebody said, well, you think you're going to do it opening day? You think you're going to do it this day? I can't answer that, really, when I tell people. I said, the only thing I can do is go out and try.
The excitement is here, and Aaron can put on the finishing touch.
He told me, he said, Dusty, he says, yeah, I'm going to look for a slider on the outside and hook it over the left field fence.
3-1 pitch.
And that's what he did.
There's a drive into left field. That ball is going, and out of here. Henry Aaron has just tied Babe Ruth in the all-time home run parade. The record they said that couldn't be reached has just been reached by Henry Aaron.
After an off-season of anticipation, Henry Aaron had immediately made history on opening day, 1974.
Henry Aaron, on behalf of all of professional baseball, high great honor, send him this trophy, symbolic of having tied what many concede to be the greatest record in baseball.
Aaron's plan was to sit out the Braves' next 2 games in Cincinnati to try and ensure the next step, breaking Ruth's record, would come at home. But baseball's commissioner had other ideas.
The commissioner, Bowie Kuhn, was very serious about, I need to play here. If I didn't play here, he was going to take some serious action against me.
Hank wasn't trying to defy baseball or anything. It's just a matter, he just thought that he wanted to break the record at home.
The tension was nothing new for Aaron, who throughout the chase had learned firsthand how some Americans didn't want a black man to become the home run king.
It was a bad, bad time, and there were letters of not only hate, but death threats.
It bothered me at the time, to think that somebody could sit down and write vicious letters to someone.
It should have been the happiest time of his life, but it wasn't. It was probably the most driven and the most focused time.
Thank you very much, and I'm just glad it's almost over with. Thank you.
And Henry has stated just the way he feels. He's glad it's almost over with.
While Aaron neared Babe Ruth's fabled record, in New York, the house that Ruth built was falling apart. And in '74, renovations forced the Yankees to play at Shea Stadium in Queens.
Mostly, the Yankees hated playing at Shea. Bobby Mercer in particular.
Who would want to move out of Yankee Stadium? What are you going to do? They're going to refurbish, remodel Yankee Stadium, and Shea Stadium is going to be your home park.
It wasn't a very good experience over there because they said the true Yankee fans wouldn't go to Shea Stadium to watch it, and I believe it. We get some fans over there, but most of the fans were booing us. It was like being on the road all season.
Yankee Stadium's dilapidated state was a symbol of urban blight all across America.
Back then in '74, people were feeling very grim about the country. There was an oil embargo.
Oil-producing countries of the Arab world decided to use their oil as a political weapon.
It was a difficult time. People lining up early in the morning and sitting in a gas line for miles to get some gas so people could go to work.
The oil embargo, coupled with a stock market downturn, prompted a recession and the worst bear market since the Great Depression.
Things were tight. You couldn't do a lot of things you wanted to do. You had to cut back.
And then there was the burgeoning Watergate scandal in Washington, prompting many Americans to question their faith in the government.
Then we had Watergate, and every day there was something new, and it built, and it built.
I welcome this kind of examination because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
It was unfortunate for our country that Watergate occurred. It divided the country a lot.
I think in times like that, people look to sports as an antidote.
And in 1974, the 2-time defending World Series champion Athletics provided quite a diversion on the field.
We were a rambunctious group of guys. We came to town knowing that we should win most of the games that we played. We had what they called swagger.
We had won the 72 and 73 World Series, so there's a confidence factor, there's an air of you can do it again.
The A's entered 74 with their entire defense and top end of their rotation intact from the previous year. The biggest new part was manager Alvin Dark, immediately expected to lead Oakland to another title.
Alvin came to the club and he won the respect of all the players. He was a man's man. He knew his baseball. He managed a pitching staff just superbly.
Pitching staff was front and center above most pitching staffs in the major leagues at that time. We had Catfish on there, William Nolan, Ken Holtzman.
Holtzman got him with a slow curve.
Myself.
He got him.
And we had a guy named Raleigh Fingers in the bullpen.
There's a call, strike three, Raleigh Fingers.
We had talent. We had guys that could play the game. We didn't make very many mental errors out there.
And on offense, the A's were just as formidable, all adding up to make Oakland the favorite once again in 74. If the economic outlook was gloomy in the mid-70s, the so-called me decade was resplendent in color and character, making the A's a perfect fit for the time.
The Oakland A's have won their second consecutive World Series championship.
The team's wild style may have been associated with its players, but it echoed all the way up to the owner's suite, where Charlie Finley often seemed willing to do anything to draw attention to his team. And with the club's on-field success, no one was exactly in a position to question him.
Charlie Finley came up with the idea of these wild, colorful uniforms, gold, green, two-toned. We wear white pants with gold tops and green tops. On Sunday, we wore all white uniforms. You know, we never knew what we were going to wear.
Finley really kind of marketed the ball player in a uniform. Sort of brought baseball into the new era with style and fashion.
Charlie was different than any other owner I've ever been around. He might stay awake at night thinking of different ideas to use on the ball club.
And in 74, Finley dreamed up the designated pinch runner.
Charlie Finley also, with an eye toward trying to bring people to the ballpark, brought in Herb Washington, was a track star. And look, this is how good the A's were, that they could give up a roster spot, and they would use him in games, and he would steal bases.
I don't think he owned a mitt. He would be in the outfield doing his sprinter stretch and all this stuff, and we'd be taking batting practice. And matter of fact, I know he didn't own a mitt, but he could run.
The Dodgers took aim at success with more traditional methods, like a strong infield. Steve Garvey at first, Davey Lopes at second, Bill Russell at short, and Ron Say at third in their first full year together in L.A.
Ground ball to Russell, to Lopes, to Garvey, double play.
Those four guys were so consistent, making the defensive plays and being a really good offensive infield.
I liked watching Bill Russell. He could grind out pitchers tougher than anybody else.
Penguin, we used to call him a happy-go-lucky penguin, but he always knocked into big runs.
Davey Lopes was the catalyst. Very fine player, great competitor, outstanding quickness and speed. Steve Garvey was a very durable, outstanding player. Offense was his strength.
The blossoming Dodger infield got L.A. off to a strong start in 74, as the club registered baseball's best record in April. But there was also great pitching, beginning with 29-year-old Don Sutton, the longtime L.A. workhorse and the ace of their staff.
He was always going to lead the staff in innings pitched. He was always going to be a big winner, 18 to 20 games every year. And I guess the biggest thing for the manager was he was going to pitch a lot of innings.
Sutton was complimented by lefty Tommy John, who started the 74 season by becoming the first Dodger ever to win 5 games in April.
It seemed like if the ball club didn't score runs, I won 1-0. If I gave up 4 runs, the Dodgers would score 6. We had a very good team.
But a team that was prepared to be tested in the NL West by a club that had already showed an ability to run past them.
Get over here, right here, John, right here, right here. That's a boy.
The previous season, L.A. had led Cincinnati by 11 games on June 30th. But then, the Reds had caught fire, surprising the Dodgers and winning the division by 3 games.
1973, we're coming that kind of deficit. I think they just felt, well, we did it once, we can do it again. Those Reds teams had a great deal of confidence in themselves. They respected the Dodgers, but they weren't afraid of the Dodgers.
The one thing I thought that separated us from Cincinnati was their starting lineup had much more experience than our starting lineup. You're talking about Joe Morgan, Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Tony Perez. This was a tremendously good ball club.
But even with all that talent, the Reds got off to an uneven start in '74, leaving manager Sparky Anderson shaking his head. "We know it's there," Sparky said. "We just have to find a way to turn it loose."
The Reds come into the '74 season favorites, or at least co-favorites, to win the division title. Sparky felt like that the Big Red Machine could turn it on, could dominate, and put some space between them and the Dodgers.
On April 8th, 1974, Henry Aaron stood in Atlanta, still chasing baseball immortality, tied with Babe Ruth at 714 home runs.
I'm just hoping that this thing will get over with tonight as quickly as I possibly can. Thank you very much.
And here is Henry Aaron. This crowd is up all around. He's tied at 714.
It was really a damp, chilly night, and the ballpark was packed.
The pitcher facing him also wears the number 44. Let's see if that's an omen.
Al Downer, who I've never had very good luck with because he knew how to pitch, he was very smart.
My first impression is, okay, we got a guy on first base. I know if I get a ground ball out of Henry Aaron, I have a double play. So the only way you get a double play in the major leagues, you have to throw strikes. And he knew he was going to get a strike.
And this crowd is up. He's sitting on 714.
I went to on deck circle. He told me, he said, "Hey, I'm gonna get this over with right now. I'm gonna hit it over the left field fence." I was like, "Okay, man. You've done it every other time that you told me."
Here's the pitch by Downing. Swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
I thought it was a tremendous release for me, because it was over with.
The record that they set in our lifetime, or maybe any time, could never be broken, has in fact been broken.
He was relieved. He was happy. They called timeout. His family came down.
My mother, I don't know how she got down. She got down out of the stands about as quick as I could get around the bases.
Now Henry is surrounded by photographers. And as Henry will probably say in a moment or two, I'm glad it's over. It has been a rough trip.
I would just like to say that I just thank God it's all over with. Thank you very much.
How would Henry Aaron describe Henry Aaron's 715th home run?
A swing, a long drive, way back. It's gone!
It's gone! 750!
No doubt!
While Aaron's home run record dominated the headlines at the start of the season, across the game, superior pitching would rule the diamond in 1974.
Struck him out. He got him.
34 pitchers would throw 250 innings or more, the most since 1920.
In the early 70s, it was a completely different game than what it is today. Back then, starters, they wanted complete games. That's what they got paid for, was complete games.
And in '74, the number of complete games thrown represented as high a percentage as had been seen in 15 years.
This is the way things are supposed to be done. And it was a thought that when you went out there, you finished what you started.
No pitcher embodied this ethic more than the Angels' Nolan Ryan. At 27, already spinning a growing legend with a single-season strikeout record and 2 no-hitters in hand.
I think that my principal goal is to win 20 games, but if I can win 20 games and also set a new strikeout record, I'm definitely going to try.
In '74, Ryan tallied 367 Ks, becoming the first pitcher in the modern era with 3 straight 300 strikeout seasons.
Nolan Ryan struck him out with a fastball.
And in his final start of the year, he threw his 3rd career no-hitter. Despite Ryan's dominance, the Angels finished last in the AL West, a far contrast from the surprising Rangers, whose mercurial manager Billy Martin looked to match the success he'd had in Minnesota and Detroit in his first full season in Texas.
Billy would do anything
to win a game. The players picked up on that. A lot of times players will take on the persona of the manager.
Billy Martin knows how to get the best out of the guys, and he just knows how to motivate and get the guy ready to play a game.
Martin's newly acquired ace, Ferguson Jenkins, also helped, stabilizing the pitching staff. While in the outfield, 23-year-old Jeff Burroughs won the AL MVP in just his second full season.
When you're on a good ball club, things just start going good, and you're really looking forward to going to the ballpark again to see if you can win another game. And after that game's over, you're looking forward to going back.
Jeff Burroughs rockets one into the bleachers out there left.
When the season was over, I think Billy Martin was the manager of the year. Jeff Burroughs was MVP. I was the comeback player of the year. So I think it proved to fans in Texas that we had a strong organization.
The Rangers went from last place to second in the AL West, falling short only to the two-time defending world champions. As the 1974 season reached its halfway point, the Dodgers owned baseball's best record, which made it fitting that LA sent a group of 5 players to the All-Star game.
The drive to left center is good for 2 bases and an RBI. As Garvey scores.
The list included Steve Garvey, who earned the start at first base for the NL as a write-in candidate and became the first such All-Star to win game MVP.
I just can't express in words itself the thanks to all the people across the country that got me here. And I think this is my way of repaying them, because this isn't my trophy tonight, it's theirs.
One Dodger standout, not at the Midsummer Classic, was Tommy John. As just a week earlier, the lefty pitcher had suffered a frightening injury on the mound.
Right as I got to accelerate through, I felt this pain in my elbow that I'd never felt before. I went, oh man, and the ball just kind of blooped up to the plate.
He just walked off the mound into the dugout, up the runway, and into the training room. And at that point, nobody really knew anything about what he'd done.
In the training room, John consulted with team doctor Frank Jobe and Dodgers reliever Mike Marshall, who also happened to be working on his PhD in exercise physiology.
It was a serious injury. He actually pulled all of the muscles that attached to the medial epicondyle off of the bone. And that belly of the muscles were laying in the middle of his forearm, well, about halfway down, instead of being attached at the elbow as it should have been. And I was very concerned for what would happen to Tommy as a result of that very serious injury.
1974, there were no MRIs, no CT scans. The only way they could tell if you tore a ligament is hold the humerus down and open the elbow up like this. And I go, ah! And he says, oh, that's really loose.
John's season was over, and the only course of action was an experimental procedure to replace the damaged ligament in the elbow with a tendon from another part of the body.
The whole idea of coming up with this ligament transplant was the idea of Dr. Frank Jobe, and of course he had to talk Tommy into it, because I think one of the selling points had to be that, Tommy, without this, you're not going to pitch again.
I said, well, I want to pitch Major League Baseball again, and I'll do whatever I've got to do. Let's have it done. So we had the first Tommy John surgery done.
When Tommy John surgery was first performed on Tommy John, it wasn't known as Tommy John surgery. This was like creating the $6 million man, the cyborg. This was like putting a man on the moon. This was something completely innovative. No one really thought it was going to work, but it was just out of desperation that Tommy John and his doctors tried this surgery.
On the same day as John's injury, pitching greatness was recognized on a mound in St. Louis as the Cardinals' Bob Gibson became just the second pitcher ever to record 3,000 strikeouts.
There hadn't been very much fanfare about it because that's the way, Gibby was. He didn't look at those things and talk about them. When it happened, I can recall the excitement and the joy that I felt for him.
As baseball history was being made on and off the diamond, America reached an unprecedented historical juncture when the president took to the airwaves on the night of August 8th.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
The players, what I remember, really didn't focus on it. Politics, for the most part, they're not interested in it.
But a few weeks later, politics and baseball did intersect when Yankees owner George Steinbrenner pled guilty in federal court on charges related to illegal contributions to Nixon's 1972 re-election campaign.
What he did was he skirted the law by having his employees with the shipbuilding company donate money to Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, and it wasn't their money.
What I did was I went to my employees and I said, look, if you give $1, I'll give $3 to the campaign. I thought it was necessary for us, the company, and I gave my own personal money. There was no question about that.
He wound up pleading guilty to lesser charges. He suffered probably worse at the hands of Bowie Kuhn, who suspended him for 2 years than he did with the government.
Steinbrenner's tenure as Yankee owner had just begun, but he was already raising eyebrows in New York.
George Steinbrenner made contributions to the Nixon campaign, and it set a tone for newspaper people in general to have an opinion of this man who came from Cleveland to run the Yankees.
They don't come around often in baseball. A team so good, its destiny is to become a dynasty. The Athletics of the 1970s were propelled by power, but also had the speed to lead the league in steals.
One of the attributes that the A's had that people overlook is our base running ability. For years we had Campy Campaneris and Bill North at the top of the order. When you have speed on the base paths, it just really has an impact.
And while the A's had little trouble scoring runs, their pitching staff also had no visible weakness.
We had everything. We had left-hand pitching, right-hand pitching, middle relief, closing.
And leading the way was a pitcher on his way to the Cy Young, Jim Catfish Hunter.
Catfish Hunter was always recognized as the ace of our pitching staff.
There he is. If I had one game to win, I think, and I had to pick one man, it might be him.
He always set the bar for how he worked out and how he went about his business in between starts, and we kind of followed his lead. And of course, when Catfish would go out and pitch a 2-hit shutout against Kansas City, I would want to go out and pitch a 2-hit shutout against Kansas City myself.
Hunter would win 25 games on the season, thanks to a combination of southern guile and pinpoint control.
You walk a man, he starts to first base, if he has a heart attack and falls dead before he gets there, they're going to get somebody else and put him on first base. But if a guy hits the ball and he's running to first base, falls down, he breaks his leg or whatever, if you can get the ball in there soon enough, you're going to get him out because there's no way he can get to first base.
That philosophy of no mercy fit the entire A's roster well, as Catfish and company glided to a 4th straight AL West Division title by a 5-game margin over the Rangers. The AL East, meanwhile, was full of question marks and streaky teams. The Red Sox started the season promisingly, if not with the confidence of fans and observers in Boston.
I don't think people really knew what to expect in '74. The young players, the Rices, Lynns, hadn't yet arrived.
And those who were in Boston couldn't stay healthy long enough to achieve any momentum. The first big blow came when pitcher Rick Wise was overused early in the season.
They got Wise to be their consistent pitcher. They traded Reggie Smith, who was a tremendous player for him. And then Wise got hurt. He pitched 12 innings on opening day in cold, rainy weather, and he was never the same the whole rest of the season.
The Sox suffered further when 26-year-old star catcher Carlton Fisk went down, ending his season in late June.
He tore up his knee, and I remember going to see him the next day in the hospital in Cleveland, and it was very clear that there was no chance he was coming back that year.
Still, the Sox took a 2.5-game lead into August, but then their offense sputtered as the team hit just 5 home runs in a month when the rival Yankees were picking up steam. Maybe it was a coincidence, but the Yanks got hot just as 2 of their most legendary players were inducted into the Hall of Fame.
My father lived and died for baseball, and he named me after a Hall of Famer, Mickey Cochran.
I have a lot of people I want to thank, fellows like Mickey and Maris and Berra for scoring all those runs.
And now the latest Yankees were scoring some runs of their own. And by September 4th, the team completed a 7.5-week worst-to-first climb as they grew more comfortable playing their home games at Shea.
Look, it was a good part for the team to hit in because the gaps were fairly big. And that particular year, I think I hit over 300. And the team played very well, too.
But just when it seemed like the Yanks were headed for their first postseason in a decade, the winds in the East shifted yet again.
They held the lead in the middle of the month, and they let it slip out of their grasp. I don't think they knew how to win, like the Orioles knew how to win.
While the headlines had focused on the fall of the Sox and the rise of the Yanks, the Orioles had quietly been making their move, winning 28 of 34 games, under the watchful and relentless eye of manager Earl Weaver.
There's the sly fox. Don't ever count him out.
Weaver believed that fundamentals were the most important advantage they could have. And so while other teams were taking batting practice by the hour after hour, the Orioles had everybody over there with Weaver screaming at them about which base to cover every bunt play, every pickoff play, every cutoff play.
The veteran-laden Orioles roster was, as in years before, heavy on pitching and defense. And despite Weaver's preference for the big blast, the team did much of its winning with small ball.
We have to utilize our speed, and if I'm batting fourth on that team, I'm not hitting home runs. These guys are getting on base, and I'm knocking them in with singles. So they realize if they 1 or 2 runs, they're in the game.
With that recipe for success, Baltimore won its last 9 games of the season to capture the division. Of course, the reward wasn't entirely desirable. A playoff matchup with the 2-time defending champions. In a year headlined by pitching performances, there was no staff better in 1974 than the Dodgers, who led the league in ERA and featured a reliever unlike any other in the game.
Got him swinging.
Mike's screwball was more probably devastating than anything I've ever seen.
Pitch is swung on and missed. Down he goes.
Mike Marshall logged 208 innings in 1974, thanks to his arm and his brain.
He was one of these guys who was different. Marshall was a very intelligent guy who had 3 degrees from the University of Michigan, one of which was in kinesiology, which is a study of the anatomy and mechanics.
I had everything together in my game. I knew exactly what I could do with what I had.
And that's it.
I threw all the time.
Mike's theory was, he said, I've got to throw often to stay sharp.
Strikes out the side.
Through his ability and through his knowledge, he taught himself how to train his body in such a way that he could pitch just about every day.
And Marshall did nearly just that in 1974, making a record 106 appearances, en route to 15 wins and a league-leading 21 saves.
You always will see a relief pitcher maybe have 70 appearances during the course of a year if they're really good. But I don't think you'll ever see anyone come up with as many games as Mike Marshall did.
Marshall's collection of theories on mechanics and arm strength were far from conventional, but his results on the mound were hard to argue with.
They made fun of most of the stuff that Mike did. You know, it's Mike stuff. But I've never seen anybody pitch like that and be as strong as he was throwing bullets.
And the Marshall plan worked to perfection as the hurler won the NL Cy Young, while the Dodgers staff helped keep the big red machine at arm's length.
The Dodgers were your pitching team. I mean, this is you go out to Dodger Stadium, you're going to face great pitching all the time. And the Reds were an offensive juggernaut.
Cincinnati had won the NL West 3 of the previous 4 seasons, but despite 98 wins in 74, they came up just a bit short.
There was a thought on a lot of people's part that they're going to figure out a way to do it. The Dodgers are going to stumble, the Reds are going to get hot at the right time, and they closed within a game and a half, going into the season's last week and a half. Ultimately, that season can be defined by, the Reds were 6-12 against the Dodgers on the year. So if you're losing that much to the team right in front of you, that also is kind of the story of the 74 season.
In the playoffs, the Dodgers faced off against the hard-hitting NL East champion Pirates. But the Bucks' bats were overmatched by the Dodger arms, as L.A. winners of 102 regular season games, beat Pittsburgh 3-1 to earn their first trip to the Fall Classic in 8 years.
Got him swinging. The Dodgers are the champions of the National League.
In the World Series, the two-time defending champion Athletics awaited, as Oakland had clinched a third straight AL title by disposing of the Orioles in 4 games. For the first time ever, both of baseball's pennant winners hailed from the Golden State.
This is the beginning now of what has been called the Freeway Series, the Continental Tilt. For the first time in history, it's California.
Welcome to the World Series. The Oakland A's are right on target into another World Series, their third in a row. As the defending world champs going against the youthful Dodgers, they were the winningest team in baseball.
The Dodgers were a pretty supremely confident club. They thought they had arrived.
Steve, what about your feelings? You've got just 3 Dodgers who've had seen some World Series activity. What do you think?
Well, Tony, I think a lot of times the enthusiasm will make up for the inexperience. And we're just looking forward to meeting head-on-head with this team.
For some reason, we never felt we got our due as a championship team. And now the Dodgers were favored. The Dodgers were this great team. And here we were, 2-time world champions. And now we had to prove ourselves all over again.
With their eyes on a third straight title, the Oakland A's arrived in L.A. for the 1974 World Series with added motivation.
We got some bulletin board material that said that only 2 players on our team could possibly play for the Dodgers, and that was Catfish Hunter and Reggie Jackson.
And if there was any more proof needed of Jackson's talents, he provided it in the top of the second.
There's a long drive to deep left going, and gone. Jackson is homered to the opposite field. The kind of power that he has, he can hit some of the longest shots in baseball. Though the A's are on the board, they lead 1-0.
After the A's tacked on another run for a 2-0 lead, the Stars finally aligned for the Dodger bats in the 5th against Oakland starter Ken Holtzman.
All right, here's Buckner with Lopes at first, 1 out. And he goes, hit and run, a big bouncer into right field. Jackson bobbles the ball, but Buckner's going to hold. Coming to the plate is Lopes to score.
Taking no chances, Alvin Dark quickly pulled Holtzman, turning to Raleigh Fingers for a long relief assignment.
Alvin was real quiet, but he knew pitching staff. You know, with the ball club that he had in 1974 when we went to the World Series, he knew what he was doing. He was a good manager.
2 breaking balls, and then he ran the fastball on the hands to strike him out.
In the top of the 8th, the A's added another unearned run following a Ron Say error to give themselves some insurance and a 2-run lead. The damage could have been worse, if not for a Dodger rifle lurking in right center.
He should come home and score. Wynn makes one throw, and Ferguson took it with the better arm. The throw! They got him! Oh, what a play!
Oakland took the 3-1 lead into the bottom of the 9th, but then a tiring Fingers made a mistake to the toy cannon, Jimmy Wynn.
High fly ball into left center. Back goes Rudy to the wall. Leaps off. They bump together. Gone. Home run.
Which led Alvin Dark to make an unconventional move, bringing in ace Catfish Hunter to finish the game.
This must be strange to him. 1 relief appearance in the last 5 years.
2 out. 9th inning. 3-2 Oakland. Got it. And that'll do it.
A day later, Game 2 epitomized the prevailing theme of the entire season: pitching. With LA's Don Sutton and Oakland's Vida Blue each in top form on the mound.
No surprises. It's a pitching duel.
But the Dodgers continued to claw for runs, urged on by their talkative third base coach, Tommy Lasorda.
Don't help him out now, Bill! Let him be a strike! Get a good pitch, Billy! Don't help him out now! There he goes. There goes your runner. There's a fly ball. Come on, Penguin! Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on! Hold on! Hold on, Penguin! Hold on! Come on, Billy! I knew that ball was going to fall in. That's why I kept calling you over. There was no way Tennis could catch that ball. That's the way to hustle.
After the successful hit and run, LA needed an RBI in the clutch.
Lasorda doing cheerleading, telling Yeager to get your pitch. He scores 1-0 Dodgers.
What a shot! That's when Yeager jumped when he hit the ball up through the middle. Attaboy, Stevie!
2 more runs meant Sutton took a 3-0 shutout into the ninth. But a check swing double by Jackson ended his afternoon.
It is so late in the game, and I think Austin figures that I have pressed it far enough. Mike Marshall will come in.
And with runners on second and third against Marshall, Joe Moody stood in.
There's a drive into center field. There's 1 run in. Here comes Jackson in. And the tying run is at first base now.
At which point Alvin Darr called on the legs of the league's only designated runner.
We still had this kid named Herb Washington, who Mr. Finley dubbed as the pinch runner extraordinaire. And he was on the ball team at that time, specifically just to pinch run.
But Marshall had a sense of how to exploit Washington's lack of baseball experience.
Getting a jump here is different than getting a jump in a 60-yard dash. There's no gun to try to time it. You've got to read that pitcher, and some people can give you phony cues.
They got him.
Yes, Marshall picked him up.
I knew if he was going to try and take that lead, Mike was too quick for him, and he nailed him.
Marshall earned the save, and LA the 3-2 win. The 1974 World Series was headed to Oakland tied at a game apiece. Tied at 1-1, the All-California 1974 Fall Classic moved north to Oakland for Game 3, where after earning the save in the opener, Catfish Hunter was ready for more.
He is a special pitcher. He usually does his best job when the A's have to win. When the money's on the line, Hunter is as good a one-game pitcher as you'll want in the major league.
And Catfish had the Dodger bats on the line early.
I'm telling you that we got to get up on the plate. That's the only way you're going to hit up that guy. And dare him to come inside.
I know he can pinpoint as well as anybody in our league.
Great.
Not better.
Tremendous.
Meanwhile, LA starter Al Downing gave up 3 early runs and was knocked out in the 4th.
You have to give credit to Oakland. They were strong from 1 to 25 in their lineup. But I thought our ball club was a much better ball club and then we could have beaten them. But our game should have been the little ball game.
But when Bill Buckner stepped to the plate in the top of the 8th against Hunter, he looked to fight the pitcher with power.
Get on the base, Billy! Get out of here! Hit the ball! Get out of here! Oh, yeah! It's out of here!
Raleigh Fingers came in to close out the 8th, but in the 9th gave up another run before finding an efficient way to secure another nail-biting win.
Ground ball to Dick Green. Goes to second. They got him there. Over to first. Got him there. 3-2 for the 3rd game in a row, and everybody said this series was going to be an even series. Well, it can't be much more even than that.
The A's picked up where they left off in Game 4, with lefty Ken Holtzman continuing the string of impressive Oakland pitching.
Let a pitch. Got him. He's got a strong arm.
While also contributing at the plate.
That ball hit well. It is carrying.
To this day, I will not forgive Ken Holtzman for hitting a home run because I've played in 3 World Series. I've yet to hit one.
Well, that was a long tater.
It was one of those things that the A's somehow did something always different. Things like that just happen to our ball club. Guys rise to the occasion.
Guys like pinch hitter Jim Holt, who hit 143 with Oakland in the regular season, but came up big when it counted most, with the bases loaded in the 6th.
There's a base hit in the right field. Randall is scoring. Here comes Jackson. The throw in is safe. Yeager charges the home plate umpire. Denzinger. Jackson hits the dirt and evidently eluded the tag.
Holt's timely knock broke a 2-2 tie and the hearts of the Dodger faithful as the A's protected their 3-run lead with more pitching and defense.
There's a ball ran green.
The A's had a little second baseman, Dick Green, who didn't get a single hit in that World Series, but I'm sure the Dodgers had nightmares about him diving into the hole to snare a ground ball that should have gone through.
What a way to wind the game up with a flurry.
With a 3-1 series lead, the Athletics were on the cusp of a third straight title and entered Game 5 looking to clinch at home.
Well, I think a lot has to do with winning. We had won the 72 and 73 World Series, so there's a confidence factor, there's an air of you can do it again.
But the Dodgers would not go quietly.
Round third. He's coming in. The score is tied up. 2-all in the 6th inning.
Then, in the bottom of the 7th, a several-minute game delay disrupted Mike Marshall's meticulous warm-up regimen.
There was something going on out in left field. Remember, the umpires called timeout. There was an announcement. My routine before an inning, I threw 5 pitches. That was it. I knew the sequence I was going to throw to Joe Rudi. That was all pre-planned before the game started. And I didn't feel a need to throw any more pitches.
And so Marshall simply waited for the delay to be over.
He just kept loosening his arm. I guess I didn't think anything of it other than it seemed kind of strange. He wasn't warming up.
But it gave time for Joe Rudi to develop a hunch.
Joe told me later that with Mike not warming up, he figured he's going to throw him a first pitch fastball. And sure enough, he did.
There's a long drive. Mike Marshall did not take one warm-up pitch. And maybe that cost him.
The baseball gods had spoken. And now, the Oakland A's prepare to take their place in history.
We had talent. We had guys that could play the game. That's why we won. We didn't make any mistakes out there.
We beat a good team from LA, but they had never encountered the Oakland A's and Oakland A's style of baseball. And the rest is history. C'est la vie, LA.
The A's three-peat was the first in baseball since the star-studded Yankee teams of the late 40s and 50s. But Oakland's dynasty would end after 1974.
And Cincinnati has won the World Championship.
Since Mike Marshall's record-setting 1974 season, no pitcher has challenged his high mark of 106 relief appearances. Tommy John would miss all of 1975 while recuperating, but against all odds, returned to the Dodgers in '76, winning 10 games in 31 starts to earn Comeback Player of the Year honors. Since then, Tommy John surgery has impacted nearly 200 careers. After the media glare at the start of the '74 season faded, Henry Aaron comfortably returned to baseball as usual. His last career home run, when he was 42 years old, came on July 20th, 1976, number 755.